Welcome to Daniel's Inferno. My name is Daniel. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. If you have a moment, please like, subscribe, share, and join the conversation below. I'd love to hear from you. So tonight we are going to be talking about Ben Shapiro. Uh, I'm going to just put it out there right now. I'm actually quite a fan of Ben Shapiro. That's not to say that he's infallible or can't do wrong, but I have been listening to him, following him. I like a lot of the things he says. He's very no nonsense and he's very to the facts. And even though he is a conservative, he is not above um, going after conservatives. And he's very, uh, his values and his morals are his, and he follows those very, very along the line. He's a very above board person. And I like that about him. I do. So he was on the Rubin report, and they were talking about the virus, and they were talking about how Texas is thinking about reopening, even though President Trump's plan, he set out a three-phase plan for reopening, and part of the first phase is that you see a 14-day decline in the curve of people who contract or pass away from the virus. Um, this is yet to happen, but people, these governors want to reopen because there is a push from conservatives and just people in general who are worried about their livelihood to reopen. We see this all over the place where quarantines are happening. It's the same here in Canada. We're getting people on both sides of the argument. One side saying we should reopen, another side saying that even suggesting reopening makes you some sort of horrific murderer who lacks any sort of values, which I completely disagree with, I must say. There are long-term economic consequences that are being discovered and discussed. And so Ben Shapiro. On the Rubin report, as I said, they were talking about the virus. And Ben Shapiro, uh, I actually have a clip here for you to show you.
So understanding this sort of stuff is necessary to understanding public policy, and trying to balance the risks and rewards here is a difficult thing. The easiest thing you can do is say all damages caused are caused by the pandemic. All of the good things that are happening, like you being alive, that is caused by me, right? This is sort of the Gretchen Whitmer strategy in Michigan, and
Right.
that's a very easy thing to say. But in reality, not only are there countervailing issues on the other side, such as the fact that people are going to lose their jobs and their livelihoods and their dreams, and quality of life actually matters. But none of these governors are going to keep things locked down forever. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, when he said just save one life, 5 days later he's saying we're going to open up parts of New York State. Okay, so which is it? I mean, obviously that means that more people are going to be infected. So we're always going to make this public policy consideration. Nobody just wants to say the obvious truth, which is that we're all making actuarial deductions about what are the costs in terms of how many human lives, how many years of life, because that is an actual issue in actuarial tables, right?
If you don't know, actuarial tables and actuarial science is basically using mathematics and statistics to assess risks, essentially, if we're going to boil it down. It's a science. There's much more to it, but I don't want to get into that.
Somebody who is 81 dies of COVID-19, that is not the same thing as somebody who is 30 dying of COVID-19. I mean, if this were killing children, everyone would be in for lockdown forever. That's the reality, right? If a bunch of 5-year-olds were dying of COVID-19 and people were saying get back to work, I'd be like, nope, I'm not letting my 5-year-old die. If grandma
Right.
dies in a nursing home at age 81, that's tragic and it's terrible. Also, life expectancy in the United States is 80. So that is not the same thing. In moral terms, you want to save every life you can. At the same time, to pretend that it is of the same calculation, the age of the person, no public policy acts like that. Not a single public policy in American life acts like that. This is why, for example, driving is a useful economic activity. In many states, once you hit a certain age, you can't drive anymore.
So I think what people are really upset about is the fact that he said that there is a difference in an elderly person at the age of 81 passing away from the virus than a younger person in their late 20s, early 30s contracting the virus and passing away. Now, people are acting like this is just a definitive moral statement on his part that he's saying that if your elderly loved ones pass away, it's not the same as if a younger loved one passes away. That's not what he's saying. He is saying, however, that if the virus was really affecting people, our younger workforce, the people who shoulder the burden of society, that's not to say that elderly people don't have value. Trust me. I grew up with my grandparents. They're my everything. I love elderly people. I think that the history that they have is the most valuable contribution that humans could derive from each other. It's that experience that the elderly people have that is so valuable, and the wisdom that it gives us. It's just beyond measure in its value. But there's a reality that when you're elderly, you're more vulnerable. It's a fact. Now, that's not every elderly person. My grandmother had a friend actually who, at the age of, I think it was 94 or 96, she called my grandmother and said, You know, I feel like I'm starting to get a bit old. And my grandmother said, "What are you talking about? You're in your 90s." And she's like, "Well, I was doing, my usual yearly marathon, and I was a lot more tired at the end of it than usual, and I'm having a little difficulty driving." And my grandmother's sitting there like, "I stopped driving, in my mid 80s, and here you are doing marathons and driving in your 90s, so you got nothing to complain about." Sorry, it's just a funny little story. But, you know, Ben Shapiro did not say, let's go out and murder all the old people, or that all the old people don't matter. And that's kind of what kind of an argument is coming from people on Twitter, at least. That's what I'm seeing. The Huffington Post put an article out, and I will link it in the description for you. But, you know, it it's not fair. It's making these reaches, in my opinion, about the tone of what he's saying. When what he said is fairly clear to me. He stated very clearly, as you saw, that it's tragic, it's horrible, and morally we want to intrinsically protect all human life. That's very true. But there is unfortunately a reality that we need to discuss that if our economy stays closed forever, our supply chains will break down, they will degrade, and they will erode. And that could affect millions to possibly billions of people. The UN said we'd have biblical famines if we were not careful. And if you are not familiar with the Bible, from someone who is, biblical famines are very bad. Very bad. We could have 250, 500 million people starving. There's a reality that when we reopen the economy, because we can't stay locked in forever, but when we reopen the economy, there is going to be an upward trend, unfortunately, because we are going to be interacting with each other more. People are acting like if you talk about reopening the economy or making a plan to reopen the economy, then you are morally indignant of the truth that people are passing away. And that's not the case. There is, unfortunately, we need to think about people's quality of life. There is going to be a point that people's mental health starts to degrade as well during this lockdown. And that is something that we cannot really combat unless we end the lockdown. Now, I'm not saying we're at that point yet, but that is something to consider. I think the more important point is the fact that our economies are being decimated. All right. There were doctors that put a video, and I believe they were from California. YouTube took the video down, but Tucker Carlson had a segment on Fox News about it, and I can actually get a link for that if you would like. Please message me or comment, and I will get the link for you guys. But the doctors were talking about how the virus has a 0.038% chance of infection. Now, all lives matter, but does that percentage warrant the damage we've taken to our economies? Another thing, at least here in Ontario, I can tell you where I live, people have been half-assing the quarantine. You know, they've been going to public places, they've been going to parks, they've been going to, public squares and just doing unnecessary things, going on fields with their kids, 10, 20 people playing soccer together. And I'm not saying that we should control every aspect of people's life, but if we're going to quarantine to try to combat the virus, then we should properly quarantine. Doing it half is not an appropriate response. I'm sorry if you disagree. Please tell me below if you disagree with that. But I think if we are going to do something, we do it right the first time so that we can minimize the risk and the damages that everyone takes. Again, people are losing their livelihoods, their businesses, their homes. People's dreams are being shattered because of this, and it's horrific. People are losing loved ones as well. Loved ones pass away around the world daily, and it does not warrant closing our economy. Can we take steps to protect the more vulnerable? Absolutely. I think that we should talk about reopening the economy in a safe manner where there are steps in place for those who have a higher risk. So those with hypertension, uh, people over the age of 65, 70, whatever we want to put that cap at, um, people with pre-existing health concerns under a certain umbrella. Um, there are things that we can do to try to have good and responsible practices for this. And it just, to me, seems like it might be smarter to start discussing how to implement those practices and then let those who are healthy and those who are able to go out and work safely with our social distancing intact, wearing masks, washing hands, hand sanitizer, all of the regular precautions that are being taken when we go out. I'm not saying we just discard them, but I am saying we need to seriously discuss how to reopen our economies, and we need to set a deadline to reopen the economies. I know I said this in a different video I did, if you saw it, but oil, the price of oil for the first time ever was negative. So people were basically, you have 10 rocks. Your rocks are the biggest and the best, and everyone wants them. And then one day, people start trading sticks. So to get rid of your rocks, you have to now pair it with some of your sticks to get rid of your rocks because your rocks are worthless. That's what happened with oil. Governments were thinking about paying oil producers to stop producing. And for oil-based economies, that's horrific. It's just a horrific thought. And I don't know, I really can't think of something worse than the total collapse of our economy, because that seriously leads to the total collapse of society. Society and our economy are so interlinked, and what happens to the economy reverberates throughout time. We remember the 2008 financial crash. Uh, there may be people who are younger who lived through the Great Depression in certain parts of the world. There's a reason, the saying that in Germany the wheelbarrows weren't big enough to bring the money in to get a loaf of bread. And we need to avoid that. We cannot forget history. We will be doomed to repeat it. And people who are claiming you are morally indignant and that you are morally wrong for wanting to have that discussion don't don't understand the bigger picture, or they are not actually open to discussion, and they're people who speak with a tone of finality, where they're right, you're wrong, their opinion is the be all to end all. And I know some people like that. I have people on my Facebook who are shooting off about how if you want to open the economy, then you basically, you want to kill all the old people and you just want the young Ubermenschens, super people, to go on and live, like you're some sort of fascist era eugenicist who is so worried with the purity of people and society that you should just throw away the elderly. And that's so far beyond the truth. It's actually just a farce. It's laughable. That's what it is. It's laughable to think that that's what is going on. Have a discussion, please, with people. We need more discussions, not just you're wrong and I'm right. That is not the proper way for us to move forward. We're never going to get through this lockdown if we just do nothing. We can't just do nothing forever. And I mean, I know a lot of people are quite happy getting their free money. A lot of people are getting more money than they used to. Some people are getting paid double, maybe triple what they were getting paid while they were working. And other people are suffering greatly. And we really need to take into account the bigger picture. And I feel like those that are attacking Ben for his comments on the Rubin report are, again, denying the bigger picture of what's going on. Please let me know in the comments. Um, Agree, disagree. Uh, are you mad, happy, neutral about how I am with, about my feelings for Ben? Um, are other people right? Is he just, uh, is he trying to create some sort of uh, death panel, as a lot of people on Twitter are calling it? And that's actually a direct reference to something that he said a few years ago about worrying about actuarial death panels that were going around using actuarial science to determine X, Y, or Z. And people are trying to equate and conflate that that's what he is doing. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm missing something. And if I am, please let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Daniel's Inferno. Stay safe.